Hi everybody, Mr. Woz here, and welcome to a brand new episode of Wosley Science. This is our 10-year anniversary. Wait. This is our 11-year anniversary. Whew. I can't believe that. Anyway, in this episode, we are going to begin our new unit on natural resources. In particular, we're going to focus on agriculture. So, you ready, Roxy? All right, you heard her. Let's get started. So for agriculture, I'm going to begin with the roots of agriculture by talking about where it all began. And then I'm going to get to where we are now, which is mostly industrial farming. I'm then going to get into how we manage our soil and how we manage our water. The NGSS DCIs that I'm going to be focusing on can be seen here for your reference. Man, oh man, where did it all begin? It began 10,000 years ago. There was the Fertile Crescent, which is above Saudi Arabia today. This is where the idea of putting seeds in the ground and allowing you to exist in the same place and not be obligated to hunting and gathering all began. The early methods were including the idea of slashing and burning, and shifting the cultivation and terrace farming. It's been going on since then. It's the reason why there are many, many people on Earth these days. You can all put that into farming. Indigenous people have developed unique farming methods that adapted to local environments. Long before we were here, this was known as the Three Sisters Method. And you can click on the link on my slideshow if you'd like to learn more about that when they would use fish as fertilizer. Traditional farming involved saving seeds from year to year. And this practice maintained a good crop diversity and resilience to diseases and climate change. So it wasn't the idea of just planting the same thing in the same spot every year. There was a whole method to it, a whole technique that really connected itself to nature and allowed for not too many problems that we are experiencing today, that's for sure. So then came the animals. We domesticated a variety of animals like cows, sheep, horses, chickens, pigs, etc. for labor, either moving heavy things across the field. We drank their milk, we ate them, and we even used their wool for clothing. And this was happening alongside the crop cultivation. And so the idea was to move the herds on one field and then farm crops on the other, and to sort of rotate them on a seasonal basis. This traditional agriculture involved a strong connection of the crops and the animals. They mutually benefited each other. So by growing crops in one field and then keeping the animals in the other and then shifting them, the animals would then eat the old stuff, step on all the crops to push in and rotate the soil, and even their manure would then get put nutrients into the soil so that the following season crops could grow successfully there. And so here we are to a higher population and a higher demand of food. That brings in industrial farming. This is also known as intensive farming, and it's focusing on maximizing production. So getting everything you possibly can out of the ground to get as much food as possible. The most common technique is monoculture. That is the idea of just growing one single crop over a wide area. And you can see on our map on the bottom right that only certain things are grown throughout the U.S. For the most part, hay is grown, and that hay is used to feed animals, which then we use those animals to eat. So, but secondhand to that is corn in the Midwest, and then soybeans and wheat and cotton. And so instead of having a field of a variety of things, you have these fields with just the same thing. And when this happens, you also have to use synthetic fertilizers to put nutrients into the ground, and you need pesticides that will prevent a single insect that just finds that particular crop delicious and is able to wipe out a whole field. You got to keep them away. So you got to spray pesticides all over this one crop farm. The mechanization plays a big role. These huge machines, like tractors, they combine all the harvesters. They're grabbing all the things at once, allowing for as much food to be collected in the quickest way possible. So these are some basic pros and cons of industrial farming. I would write these down, and then I would give a little space for each of them, but not a whole lot. I am about to provide a lot more context on all 9 of these things. You don't need to write everything down. Please don't write everything down. I'm also going to be providing graphs for all of these to help you further your understanding of industrial farming. All right, so first off, industrial farming led to a very high food production. The U.S. produces 5 times more corn per acre today than it did in the early 1900s. One farmer, industrial agriculture, can feed 165 people compared to 19 in the 1940s. You can see here just how much more food we can grow per acre. We kind of lowered food costs. I'm going to get back to this one. So if we, on a large scale, production reduces the cost of food. This is why, buying things at bulk at Costco can kind of save money. It's like that, but on a grand scale. 25% in 1930 to about 10% today. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, in terms of the money that you made, a fourth of your money used to go towards food, and now today about 10% of the money that people generally make go to food. So that sounds good, right? Technological advances have been made, so genetically modified food, GMOs, and precision agriculture has led to a boost in productivity. So we can genetically modify corn and so many other things to withstand droughts and be more resistant to certain pests. You've seen the size of strawberries these days. They're huge. And this can lead to much more food being grown in the fields. There's less land that is needed for more production. So basically, we've seen a boost of 170% from 1948 to 2015. But the size of our farms has remained pretty much constant. And that's really good because as we've increased in population and needed more food to eat, we haven't had to chop down more trees in the U.S. and cause more deforestation. That's in the U.S. though. But as I'm alluding to, there's a lot of cons, to industrial farming, and it's really starting to catch up on us, and that's kind of what the rest of this video is going to be about. So first off, industrial agriculture is responsible for 30% of the global greenhouse gases in the world. Pesticides and fertilizers are causing soil degradation and water pollution. There's over 500 dead zones in the ocean that are linked to agriculture runoff. So one of the reasons for this is livestock is when cows eat, they have to chew a lot, and so they actually burp up the grass that they're eating, then chew it and then digest it, and then it comes back and they chew it and digest it. And while they're doing this, they're constantly burping out methane. And so and as we know, methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So that's not good. There's huge concerns for animal welfare and you know how I feel about that. Factory farming confines animals into little tiny spaces. A good rule of thumb is for a chicken, for example, who lives for about 40 days, lives in an amount of space that is equal to a sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11 inches. And 99% of the animals that we consume in the US are from these types of factory farms. Animals produce more milk and their meat tastes a lot better when they're less stressed out. That's a fact. If you're more curious about this, I recommend the book called Eating Animals. It takes this animal welfare and our issues with factory farms and looks at it at a very pragmatic basis without like completely grossing you out. We're having some major soil issues, which we're going to talk about more in a little bit, but there is some depletion going on. And as you can see, the US is really going through it. 75% of global crop diversity is being lost since the 1900s due to monoculture farming. In other words, we just mainly farm the exact same kinds of crops, and this lack of diversity is starting to make the soil less rich in nutrients. Then you have antibiotic resistance happening. So 70% of the antibiotics in the US are used in livestock, and they're making bacteria resistant to those antibiotics, which makes the antibiotics less effective. And then you can have superbugs come from farms. We've heard of bird flu, and this is responsible for 35,000 deaths in the US. It's very serious. And last, there is a loss of small farms. All the farms these days are just huge operations owned by not just, old McDonald. The number of US farms has decreased from 6.8 million to 2 million. I want to get back to when I was talking about lower food costs, because it's not really true. There's hidden environmental costs that we just talked about. For one, all these pesticides and fertilizers, they're making the environment destroyed, and that's going to cost a lot of money to bring it back. The small farmer is still struggling, so all these things haven't really made their lives better. In fact, when you really talk to them, they'll tell you how much worse their life is than their father or grandfather. There's a lot of public health costs, and that's costing us money at a federal level. There's market distortions and economic inefficiency. So you may be familiar with this term subsidies, which the government basically buys the food to make the cost of the food lower to the consumer. But we all pay our taxes, so our taxes are going into those subsidies. So really, you kind of pay for it twice at the grocery store and you don't even realize it. Then it creates a dependency on government support. So now we have to have those, because if we pulled those away, the price of a chicken would just go from whatever it is, I think it's like $12 or even less at Costco, to like $40, and people would totally flip out. And now we're so vulnerable to what's happening with climate change. This idea of just growing the same thing, monoculture, puts us much more vulnerable because there is less resilience. You have much more resilience when you have a diversity of things that you are farming, because if one thing goes down, it's not like you put all your eggs in one basket. Pun intended. What does this all mean? While subsidies make industrial farming appear profitable in the short term, they don't account for the full cost of the environmental damage, the public health risk, the market inefficiencies, and the dependency of government aid. A more sustainable food system would prioritize regenerative and small-scale farming, which would reduce long-term and increase resilience. And if you're really interested in this stuff, consider watching the two documentaries, Food Inc. and Food Inc. 2. Well, that was fun. Let's get into soil management now. For farming to be the most successful, you need the perfect mixture of particular sediments. They call this the loam. And what does that consist of? 20% clay, 40% sand, and 40% silt. And when you have this ratio of the different size particles, it does the best job at retaining water for long enough for the plants to get it, but at the same time also allow the water to drain out so that you don't have flooding. Go loam. In addition, soil with this consistency does the best job at keeping microorganisms happy and alive, such as bacteria, fungi, and even little critters. These microbes are the key to giving the crops the nutrients that they need to grow from their new roots. And this keeps the nitrogen cycle going and happy. Well, farmers are well aware of their soil. They got to take good care of it. And one thing that they do is tilling. Tillage is the mechanical agitation of the fields. This is when they plow it and they overturn it. They do this because they want to aerate the soil. And they got to remove the leftover plant material from the previous harvest. And it's not really good. It's actually really bad for several reasons. For one, tilling releases CO2 in the atmosphere. Now, as we know, more CO2 is greenhouse gases that makes the planet hotter. The second thing is that overturning the soil changes the properties, so no more loam zone for us, and this makes the water evaporate from it or sink through it. By disturbing the soil so much, the microorganisms work less efficiently. When you remove the plant material from the last season, that was perfect compost that you just literally threw away. And that could have provided nutrients for the next season. And nutrients is what is in fertilizer. So you could have just saved yourself a whole bunch by not having to use more fertilizer. The machines that till the soil, they release lots of methane. So those giant tractors and such that we saw before, they're releasing a greenhouse gas that is much more potent than CO2. And the next season of crops won't dig their roots deep into the ground. And then this will make the farmer, as a result, have to irrigate the crops even more. They're going to need more water because the more shallow that your roots are, the quicker that the water will just run through you, and then you're just going to need more water in order to be alive. This is what is happening because of our soil. It is really going down the tubes because of tilling. Okay, so tilling's really bad. I'm now going to show you 6 techniques that would reverse the degradation of this resource. So you could go ahead and make a table that would look like this, and there's going to be 5 more that are coming, just FYI. So let's start off with cover crop. Cover crop plants and protects to improve the soil nutrients rather than for harvesting. So what you do here is you put a crop that you're not necessarily going to farm and then use, but the purpose of the crop is actually just to add nutrients back into the soil. So mustard seed is an example of this that farmers are now using, and what it does is the crop that you're not using would then take in more CO2, so that's great, and it would provide more nutrients. And it would also just be there on the season you're not using it, so it would continue to improve your water quality. Next, you have conservation tillage. So what this is instead of completely ripping apart the ground, you're only ripping apart it on the tippity top, and you're not really getting too deep in there. And so that way, the residue of the old crop is left behind, as well as its roots and even like a small part of the stem of the plant, and that can then break down, go back into the soil, and then be used. It's essentially being used as compost. So less farming equipment is needed, so less methane gets released, and it reduces soil erosion. This next one is organic agriculture. So by using crop rotation, so no more monoculture, but now rotating and using different crops for seasons or within the same season, composting, using biological pest control, this will maintain your soil productivity. You'll then less pesticides and fertilizer would be needed, which would save you money. And what happens as a result is about 60% less energy is used than industrial farming, and the soil is much better at storing carbon. This is a better retention of your soil nutrients as well as soil erosion. You're seeing that like all these things are reducing soil erosion like all around. So with graze and land management, what you're doing is you're simply either cutting down on the amount of livestock or you're moving them around from field to field so that they're stomping on the same field less, and you're also spreading out where they are. This reduces the soil compaction and also lowers methane. As I was telling you before, when cows chew and burp, they release methane. So anaerobic digesters are pretty cool. For one, they can give you electricity. And so what you're doing is you're taking the animal waste, like literally the manure, and you're putting them in these dome-shaped things. And what happens is as the manure breaks down, it releases methane. The methane then gets captured. Funny thing, methane is CH4, which is also gas and natural gas. And so that could then be used to literally help run the farm and get electricity. And last, we have retaining or restoring native ecosystems. This is probably my favorite one. So bringing back the flowers and the crops that grew natively in that area. That's what this is, returning the land to its natural state. When you do this, it's so much better for pest control because you're going back to the way the ecosystem was. And so there's a diversity now. The ecosystem knows how to run itself, and it doesn't rely on needing to be watered all the time, needing to have pesticides sprayed all the time, needed to have fertilizer put on it all the time. Two things I'd like to recommend. One, the Wild Seed Project. It's these amazing books that you could read about how to turn your own lawn into having native plants, but also how to garden in that sense. And this documentary called Kiss the Ground is really good. I highly recommend this one as well. All right, we're in our last topic, water management. I'm going to show you 4 ways that water is used in farming. The first that we have is irrigation. Irrigation is supplying the water to the crops using canals, sprinklers, and drip systems. The second way that water is needed is for the livestock. They got to drink water. And so providing water for those animals, but also you have to dilute or move all that animal waste. That's a yucky picture to the right. Third is for processing and cleaning the crops. So a lot of water is actually sprayed to get debris and dirt and the pesticides off of the crops. And last, for soil moisture management, you have to water the dirt, right? You have to maintain the appropriate water level in the soil to make sure that it's saturated. Agriculture accounts for 70% of the world's water usage. Take that in for just a sec. And you thought it was our showers and our toilets and us drinking it all the time. Nope, it's the farming. One hamburger takes 1,800 gallons of water to make. So this truck right here that you see on the bottom has a tank on the back of it that can fit 1,800 gallons of water, just for some perception. Efficient water management is going to be essential for sustainability and food security because poor water management can lead to scarcity, can lead to soil degradation, and as a result, we're going to be able to produce less food. And for our last concept of this video, we're going to talk about water runoff. So industrial farming uses fertilizers and pesticides to keep the crops alive. However, not all of it is used by crops. The leftovers seep into the soil and eventually enter the groundwater. Once they're in there, they can flow to the watershed, get into streams, rivers, and eventually the ocean. So here's my AI generated beautiful, lovely meandering river with a farm around it. Isn't it lovely? They're definitely going to be practicing some industrial farming, so brace yourself. The farm needs to use fertilizer to add nutrients into the soil because tilling is the way to go for these guys, and they're going to remove those nutrients out. Leaving the land bare, no helpful insects or creatures are left to eat the potential pests. So as a result, the farmer has to add the pesticides as well. So here comes the fertilizer. So the fertilizer gets poured on all of the fields. It's impossible to put down an amount of fertilizer that only the crops would use. More the merrier, right? So the excess nutrients start going into the soil, into the groundwater, and into the river. Now, the two names of nutrients are nitrates, which is NO3, and phosphates, which is PO4. Now, the excess nutrients are in the river. Crops aren't the only thing that like nutrients. Single-celled algae, known as phytoplankton, love nutrients, so they're going to start to grow and multiply, soaking up all the nutrients in a quick period of time. There they are. Now, these particular plankton don't like Krabby Patties. They love the nutrients. Now the river's green, just chock full of them. It's slimy and gross. There's too much phytoplankton. The algae start to take in all the nutrients, all of it. And now there's like no more, so the whole system becomes unstable. They can't support this algae bloom anymore, so the algae all die at the same time from a lack of the nutrients. The bacteria then get to work to break down their dead algae bodies. They require oxygen for the decomposition process. This is an aerobic process. Do you think the river has an infinite available amount of oxygen in it? No. The bacteria continue using all the oxygen up. This lowers the dissolved oxygen to the point that the animals in the river, like fish, die. This is the story of a process known as eutrophication. It creates dead zones in rivers and in oceans. You'll hear this again in your biology class next year, but just remember where you heard it first. Alright guys, that's it. What I did was I posted some trailers and some documentaries to the ones that I mentioned in this video, so that if any of these pique your interest, feel free to click on them. Alright, thanks so much for watching guys, and take care.